Hi, welcome to the Craft Sanctuary. My name is Yarrow. I'm a queer maker living in Scotland, and I'm hosting this podcast to explore making as healing, landscape as belonging, and grief as a door. I also host a creative community that you can join on a pay-what-you-can basis. We meet weekly for cozy creative co-working sessions and have a supportive space on Mighty Networks. You can find the link in the show notes, and if you have a second, I would also really appreciate a review. Thank you so much. I'm sending love to you and your making practice. Hi friends, thank you so much for joining me for an episode about just wanting to play and exploring what that means. I want to begin with a deep sigh. That's kind of always appropriate, I think. And I also want to begin by orienting us in time and space and telling you when and how I'm recording this, because I think, like I've said many times, of this podcast as this living archive, and I know that sometimes people listen back way into the future. So I'm recording this on a Wednesday evening on October 19th, 2022. I'm sitting on the floor of my living room surrounded by yarn and my two dogs, some tea and some beetroot juice. And I'm in a creative space session that I'm facilitating. At the moment, I'm offering them twice a week. They're really gorgeous, and we're just hanging out on Zoom, and everyone is kind of working on their own project, but there's this gentle accountability of going through it together, which I really appreciate. And today I've been thinking about what it means to be playful in life and kind of what's stopping me being more playful. And so if that speaks to you, I want to take you along that exploration and invite you to think about that too. I had a really shit day yesterday. All kinds of stuff went wrong. I got my period really unexpectedly. I was just feeling really, really grumpy. And then all kinds of things that I had kind of set out to do just kind of didn't work out. And I basically went to bed at 7 because I felt like I just needed to reset. Like there was just nothing to rescue from my mood basically, or from this day. And that felt really nice. So I went to bed, I lit some candles, I listened to an audiobook, and I just did that for maybe an hour and a half, and then I slowly fell asleep, and I had a good 9 hours, and I woke up feeling really completely different and quite grateful for my bed and my bedroom. And today it made me think about kind of how hard it sometimes can be to move out of these like stuck spaces of things just don't feel like a fun exploration, but there's just so much adulting, so much to figure out here in the UK, and I feel like a broken record even though I'm not mentioning it that often. And also I really know this is the case all around the world in different ways, but there's just again a lot of political unrest. We technically have a new prime minister and had her for the last 2 weeks, and it looks like that is coming to an end again, which to be honest can only be a good thing in some ways, but there's just been so much chaos with our currency, with our mortgages, with the economy here, and it's really affecting people, and I'm just heartbroken for the increasing amount of hardship and poverty people are experiencing, which is really unnecessarily and really violent, and I just over capitalism basically. Anyway, so where do we see comfort for these things, and how do we find balance with kind of being present with what is and being a compassionate person and looking to the world, but also staying in our own spaces and presence and making sure we're not becoming burned out and then unhelpful in some ways. And what that made me then think about was kind of what could have happened in the last few years. And while maybe that's a stressful thought, I don't know, everyone is different with this kind of stuff, but for me, I really love thinking about worst case scenarios. So check in with yourself whether that feels true for you as well. It certainly doesn't have to, but for me, when I'm feeling low-level anxious, I really like to pause and think about, okay, what could have happened to me in the last few years, and what might happen to me moving forward. And also with that, I like to remember, and I really don't remember this all the time, obviously. I'm not some kind of perfect being living in gratitude all the time, but I'd like to remind myself sometimes that life really doesn't owe me shit, technically. I deserve respect and decency and to be seen as a human being. But beyond that, I'm sometimes kind of like scaling my expectation back to being like, what is still bringing me joy? What feels playful here? Where is potential for creative response? And yeah, like sometimes my friend and I just message each other, well, I know life doesn't owe me shit. And sometimes that feels liberating because it takes some expectation away, both from my circumstances, but also from myself, in kind of what I'm making happen right now. And it allows for some gentleness because, just kind of feels simple. Yeah. And then, so I'm really just taking you along the stream of consciousness. And as I was sitting with that, so okay, like life isn't really owing me shit. So what do I want though? Like, what do I want to do this winter and these coming years, and really kind of with the rest of my life, however long that is, which I have zero control over. I mean, maybe some control, but not a lot. And what felt true today was that I really, really just want to play. I just want to be really playful. And when I allow myself that simplicity and this like really low level expectation and just curiosity and openness, things just suddenly feel easier. And I can drop some of the ideas of what it means to be an adult. And I'll give you an example of something that has become kind of a bit burdensome. So 2 years ago, I bought my first home in Scotland. This is something I've been wanting my whole life and have really intentionally worked towards really since being a teenager. I've been in a lot of shitty living situations. I've paid so much rent in my lifetime. I've gone into debt to pay rent. I've done all kinds of weird stuff to have a home. And this has just always been so important to me. I've always dreamt about painting the walls and learning all kinds of DIY skills. And in 2020, it was finally time. I managed to buy my first home. And I sadly had to leave it because of my accident. I couldn't do the stairs anymore. But this year in March, I moved into a new home, which I also really love, and maybe actually really love a little bit more than my first home. But I think as the more instability I've been experiencing around me, be that politically or within my family or within my work, and just kind of, there's just a very big sense of uncertainty, I guess, in lots of ways. The more I sometimes have become really fixated on repaying my mortgage as soon as I possibly humanly could. And I have this Excel sheet where I'm tracking the money that I'm spending and the money that is coming into my life, and that feels really good. I like kind of having this overview and being really intentional with what I'm spending money on and just kind of understanding my finances. Maybe this is dorky, I don't know. I have it pastel color coordinated, and for me it's quite joyful to look at. And yeah, certainly maybe also like this sense of control. But anyway, I think looking at that sheet, I just became so fixated on repaying my mortgage as soon as I could, and trying to kind of think of creative ways of which, would help me make it move faster. Also because part of this big chaos in the UK at the moment is that the central bank has increased the base rate, meaning that the mortgage rates are going up quite a lot, and that's affecting millions of people, especially those on either a tracker mortgage or a mortgage that has a term that comes to an end soon. So sometimes people fix their mortgages for quite some time. I fixed mine for 5 years, so I have a lot of time left. But sometimes people fix it for just 2 years, and so when that rate comes to an end, you basically get onto the new rate that your bank offers you. And with how things changing at the moment, that's just very unpredictable. And so I would love to, just not have so much of a risk at the end of my mortgage term because I've repaid a big chunk. But what that also made me feel like is that a lot of my dreaming, or like my moving towards, or my, this is what I desire, this is what I want to put energy into, is so much more risk mitigation than playfulness. Because my thought is, once I have repaid my mortgage, I can work in a way that prioritizes commercial viability less, and that's maybe more focused on taking exciting creative risks and offering meaningful things to my communities without worrying so much about how much I need to charge or what people can afford, or all those kinds of fun things. And I think that's valid. I'm still really holding that as a desire. I would love to repay my mortgage as quick as possible, but I want to question kind of what that stands for. And really it kind of stands for playfulness, which can only happen in a space in which I feel fairly safe. Actually, now that I've said that out loud, I don't know if I want to phrase it that way, because that feels a bit like we can never have fun unless we have total stability, which would mean we probably could never have fun, but I think you get the idea. I was thinking along the lines of like, how can I basically give myself that freedom? But I don't want to delay gratification all the time. We just don't know how old we're going to get. And as I was thinking about the last 2 years and what could have happened, I was like, well, I could have died of COVID. I could have died in my accident. I could have died in all kinds of ways. And while technically the chances or the odds were really low for that to happen, still, I want to just kind of pause here for a moment and be like, I made it through quite okay. The accident sucked. Losing my friend was the saddest thing that's ever happened to me. I was incredibly lonely for really long periods of time, being isolated in lockdowns. But somehow I'm still here, and I'm still creative, and I still have work, and I have a home, and I have my dogs, and I have friendships that made it through. And that's so beautiful, and I'm really excited. And yeah, so just wanting to play and explore the human experience. That also made me think about the gift of being queer. I've just arranged to see my family for Christmas in December. I'm not going home for Christmas because that seems really stressful and expensive, but I'm traveling kind of early in December to go and see them. And so I'll see my extended family, and with that is often some sense of expectation, as the year is coming to an end. People have questions. They want to know where you're at. And usually that's coming from a really loving place. But somehow it also sometimes has this undertone of like, why aren't you married yet? Are you sure you don't want kids? Maybe you want to get a real job. That kind of thing, And so I was thinking about how feeling this sense of like, maybe, those expectations will never be really fully for me. Some of that maybe, yes, but being queer to me at this time is a gift, in that I know that for a really long time as an adult, how long have I been out now? Gosh, maybe 15 years, I'm not sure. But for a really long time, I've known that I won't be ticking these boxes anyway. And so what else can I do, or what else can I free myself from? And that's great. The other day I hosted my first dinner party post lockdowns. It was really small and sweet, and I had in the middle of the table this little bowl with conversation starters that I made, because I introduced some people to each other that didn't know each other that well, and I really wanted everyone to be super comfortable. So I wrote these questions, and then we pulled them out of this little bowl that I'd made, and we were asking them of each other. And one of the questions was, what has always been true about you? Do you want to tell us a cute story from your childhood? And a story that I told was that when I was a toddler, my parents often made me a setup to paint. So I had this finger paint, and I was allowed to paint on the walls. And I also had chalk and this little kind of space in my bedroom basically to paint. And so sometimes they would be encouraging me and say like, hey, is now a good time to paint? And I would say yes, but I needed to get naked to paint. And this, it's really funny, like they still say, tell the story of how like I was super convinced as a kid that in order to paint you had to be naked. And maybe partially that was practical because of the finger paint and it just kind of going everywhere. But I think there was just also something in me that always knew that you had to be really free to express yourself, and it would be more fun, to be turning up the heat and be naked in your bedroom and just kind of listen to your body and paint and not be restricted by any kind of clothing. And that kind of playfulness is something I really want to come back to and have more of in my life again. And then, and I'm coming to the end of this very long stream of consciousness. Thank you so much for listening. Then I was thinking about, well, what is stopping me now as an adult in my mid to late 30s, being in this headspace? And there's basically 3 objections that my mind came up with. The first one was, well, does it mean that I'm regressing? And I think the answer is very clearly no, because I feel that I can hold both my adult responsibilities and that kind of playfulness. And I also think that the playfulness will maybe inform my sense of responsibility as an adult in some way that I don't even understand yet. My second objection was, does it mean I'm not maturing in the way that I should? And again, I think the sense of development or forward movement I've had in the last 2 years have really come from a space of creativity and exploration and responding to difficulty in ways that felt authentic and true to me. And we have to be playful to get there. And the third objection was, will that mean that I'm living without spiritual depth? And I don't even know what that means, to be totally honest with you. But I was probably kind of thinking along the lines of like, well, if you want to have a spiritual life, you have to quite commit to quite serious practice, I guess, and be quite earnest about that. And I don't think that that's a contradiction at all, actually. I do feel a lot of devotion in my life and in my practice, and I feel I have a lot of spiritual depth in my day-to-day, which I couldn't live without, and I think that playfulness is really just adding to that. I will tell you a fun story as a side note. I have a wonderful friend called Sophie, and a few weeks ago I shown her this video which I'm looking at as part of my studies of culture and heritage at the University of the Highlands and Islands in Scotland. And this video was a video of people in the Outer Hebrides singing psalms in Gaelic, which is a tradition that's still alive there today. And it was really it was a beautifully made video. In the beginning, the presenter kind of contextualized where this video was made and who was singing and what the linguistic context was and so forth. And then he said, but let me remind you that first and foremost, we're here to praise God. And now we're saying that to each other occasionally. We're talking about all kinds of complicated day-to-day things. And then sometimes someone will throw in and say, but let us remind each other that first and foremost, we're here to praise God. And it feels funny and cute, but there's also some truth to it. It does feel playful to come back to that space of just appreciation for being alive and being curious about what I can do with the more painful parts of, being a human in 2022. All right, that was my little waffle. I hope you got something out of that. I would invite you to think about what your relationship to playfulness is right now. Does it feel true for you that you just want to say, to make it simple, the rest of my life, I just want to be playful? And if not, what kind of objections is your mind coming up with? All right, love you. Bye.